another episode of the Byproduct Podcast. I am your host, Ian Pruckner. I'm excited to be here with you, as always, getting better together, because when we get better, things get better. And today, I'm very, very excited to have an old and good friend of mine, Chris Cook, just released a brand new book, Healing What You Can't Erase. And it's everywhere. Barnes & Noble's got it in its new noteworthy section. I mean, really making some waves and making a lot of impact. And for those of you who don't know Chris, Chris is just a solid salt of the earth guy. He was involved in a lot of different ministry things. That's how we originally connected. And we just built a friendship back in Michigan, where I'm from originally. And over the years, just watching Chris grow in his leadership and in his care and love for people, his heart bleeds through people and making their lives better. And so, Chris, I'm super excited to talk about sort of the current opus of your life's work in the book right now. I'm sure there are more versions of that to come as life goes on and as we continue to develop it. But right now, this is like sort of a masterpiece work out there, and it's so needed. It's so needed right now. And so, Chris, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us. Talk to me a little bit about healing what you can't erase. What does that mean to you? Why did you write this book?
Well, first of all, Ian, I just want to say thank you for having me. It's just a great opportunity to connect again. We go almost 20 years back now, so this is just a fun conversation. But let's get right to it. Healing what you can't erase. It's a deeply personal phrase for me because it embodies my life experiences. And all of us are going to experience adversity in life, so much so that those experiences of adversity, crisis, challenge, loss, disappointment, though I believe there is an invitation to move forward, the experiences and the memories themselves, even as traumatic as they are, will never be erased from the history of our life experiences. Those experiences will never be erased from the life that we lived, which means there's an opportunity. So they can affect almost like a lens about how we see ourselves, life, opportunity, relationships, or we can move forward, not on, but move forward through them, grow, learn, be stronger, I believe, over time through transformation, and end up, I'd say, going further, not necessarily faster, because I know that phrase is great, further, faster. It might not be faster, but I do believe, Ian, that adversity, when we reframe it, can build muscles of endurance and persistence in us that grow us and enable us at the end of the day. I know you just met with John Maxwell, so I'll use a Maxwell-ism to add value to more people.
Yeah. Wow. So good. So good. And I love what you're talking about there. It's we have these things. All of us have them. That is not unique to us, but each of our experience is unique. But what's so interesting, right, is I find a lot of people try to stuff those things down, or they try to get rid of them. And what you said is like, hey, you're going to live with these most likely. You're not going to get rid of them. And you see people do really crazy things trying to get rid of them, right? You see people numbing themselves with substances or stuff or fame or whatever in sort of an attempt to maybe try to minimize that versus working through them and letting them work in you, right? And you had said two things, a lens and a frame. I actually wrote that down as you were talking, right? Like, these things become sort of the lens that we look at life through, right? And if we're not careful and we're not purposeful with how we deal with these things, many times we'll begin to see the world in ways that don't serve us and don't serve the people around us.
That's right.
And so good. I love it. One of my favorite quotes right now is, life is hard. And the sooner we are willing to embrace that, the easier life becomes. Right. And so that sort of dials in with this, because we've got what we've got. Right. We may not be able to erase it. Now we got to work with it. How do we work with it? And that's what you have here in this book, is a manifesto on how to do that.
That's exactly right.
So talk to me a little bit about a couple of the main ideas that you're trying to get across to people. Right. So like the top one or two things that you see that cause people to use adversity well, and maybe cause people to not use adversity well. And how do we navigate that pathway, that road between the two ditches there?
What a phenomenal question. You're so good at this, Ian. Okay. I actually want to go back to what you said earlier about this, because there will be a couple opportunities for us to choose which road we're going to take through adversity. Adversity will form us. I want to back up and just sort of contextualize this by saying, undoubtedly, we are in a worldwide mental health crisis. Depression and anxiety and the like are at a fever pitch. And yet the self-help industry continues to respond with feel-good promises it simply cannot deliver. And it leaves people then in confusion, in regret, and in despair. So, what do? There is a neurobiological wiring in us to survive. And that survival drive, that survival motivation will either cause us to look inside of ourselves and to become reclusive, to self-protect ourselves from a very quote-unquote dangerous life. So let's frame this for the entrepreneurs and for the business folks hanging out with us today. There is a nature of entrepreneurial endeavors that requires risk, and maybe right now you're facing risk, and your subconscious narrative is saying, this never works out for me because not only have I made a mistake, I am defective. Therefore, you will choose to level off unintentionally in your business pursuits. And for the sake of the business, that's not helpful. But let's just say to the personal side of things, that's not helpful either. So when adversity hits, and steer me a little bit back to your original question if need be, but when adversity hits, we can self-protect or we can move forward through it. How does that happen? Okay. In the book, I talk about really the pathway through this is surrender. Now, many people say, give up? Surrender? I'm like, no, surrender is not giving up. It's giving in. Let me explain that. Surrender is giving into a process of confrontation where we look ourselves in the mirror with the help of advisors, coaches, etc., to see our limited beliefs, our dysfunctions, our poor thinking, our core mindsets, the default narratives of fear, shame, and guilt that are actually lodged in the subconscious that are not only driving our ability to make decisions and choices effectively, but they frame our ability, as we said earlier, like a lens to see ourselves correctly. And so when that lens is not attuned properly, we will hit that lid. So surrender, giving in, is this process where we confront the limited beliefs, where we look ourselves in the mirror, see the dysfunctions, the maladies of the soul, and say, listen, I know that transformation will not happen overnight, but it will happen every day. I get better every day. I mean, this is James Clear, Atomic Habits. Get 1% better every day. So what can I do today? What can I do with what I have in my hands in my arsenal today to get better? And this is not a self-help trope. This is saying I've got to unearth the shame narratives, and we can't do this alone. We need coaches. We need help. We got to unearth the shame narratives, the fear narratives that are actually not speaking to our ability and our performance, but to our identities.
Wow, that's so good. Yeah, and I love what you said. Surrender isn't giving up; it's giving in.
Yes, sir.
Giving in to the fact that we can stop running from these things in our life that we're afraid. If somebody ever really saw this, or if they really knew, maybe they wouldn't feel the same way about me. Maybe I wouldn't feel the same way about me if I wasn't shoving this achievement and that success and this new car and what these people think and the amount of likes. I don't know that I'd like to see what's in there, right? And so
Ian.
we kind of keep up this pace, and it brings me to a question. You said we're in a mental health crisis, and I believe that 150%, right? Why do you think that that's occurring? How is that so prevalent today when maybe 50 years ago it just didn't seem like there was so much out there around this? What do you think is causing that? And you talked a little bit about people, instead of trying to avoid it, like working through it, right? So like, what does somebody do that says, okay, I'm tired of running and I'm tired of pretending and I need to do some of this deep work. I need to get this done. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, so let me go to the first part of your question first. 50, 60 years ago, even if we're honest, Ian, when you and I were growing up in the 90s, this wasn't a thing. So we're 100%. Even talking like 30 years. What's been the inflection point? Where did this begin to turn on its head? Well, I'd like to suggest It has to do with two things. Number one, pace. Number one, pulse of our society. I think we are exposed to an insane amount of information at our fingertips like never before. I heard a stat the other day that in essence, by a certain age, we have as much information stored in our brains as the entire New York Library or something like that. But we don't know how to access that. So then there's the clickbait, there's the algorithms, there's the constant stimulation. I mean, by picking up your phone first thing in the morning, you are throwing off your default dopamine state and depleting yourself immediately. So from a mental health perspective, when I'm in a theta brainwave state, when I'm receiving and just waking up and new information is coming in and essentially I'm recording new information, the worst thing I can do is pick up my phone and allow the traumas of the world to infect and affect my heart, my mindset, not just my thoughts, Ian, my mindset, before truth can get in. This is why I'm such a firm believer about setting my mind and keeping it set. Now, as a person of faith, what does that mean for me? I wake up every day and I set my mind on the truth of the scriptures. Maybe for someone else joining us that doesn't have that lens, that's fine. What would that be? Maybe you have a set of affirmations, or you're going to spend some time thinking about truthful things that can move the needle in your own life. But the worst thing we can do is fill our mental real estate with the traumas of the world immediately. It's a terrible place to live from.
It's so interesting, Chris. Sorry to interrupt you there, but
you're good.
Traumas of the world. I wrote this down because I think you're dead locked into something here, right? Because like I look at when we were growing up, you had like local news or nightly news, right? But you were not instantly connected to everybody's issue all of the time, nonstop. And you're talking geopolitical issues, you're talking social issues, and then you're talking Aunt Tina's burnt lasagna that set off the smoke detector, but it's coming from everywhere all the time, nonstop. And I don't think our brains were wired to handle this. Chris, I had a funny conversation with a friend of mine. She was in LA last weekend at a party that included a bunch of like the former Seinfeld guys that wrote and directed it. And anyways, there's an AI robot, first of its kind. And the AI robot was at the party with its handlers or whatever you call these things, right? And the AI robot was telling jokes and it was hanging out or whatever. And they would let it, converse with the people. So my friend went and asked the AI robot a question. And what ended up happening is the handler actually stopped and spoke the question into a microphone in a reworded way. He said, well, why are you doing that? And he said, there's so much noise and so many data inputs, so many stimulus inputs going on that our brains can tune out the things that are not relevant to us for the most part, and we can just hear the things that matter. So the AI doesn't understand that yet. So the AI is listening to the crap we're listening to, and the AI can't figure out how to even function. It needs to be dumbed down and have its commands given to it sort of unilaterally. It cannot come amidst the society. And I listened to that today. Just this morning, I had this conversation. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
The most powerful computing forces in the world cannot handle 60 seconds of the stimulation that we as human beings are around 24 hours. Can't function. Can't even make a decision. Don't know what you're asking it. Can't come up with an answer. It freezes. It doesn't know what to do. And yet here we are consuming and surrounded by this. And then we wonder, like, why am I struggling with this? Hey, look, man, like the AI is struggling with it too. So it's so interesting there.
We are living I think, Ian, we're living in a world that our bodies were never designed for. I mean, like neurophysiologically, the stimulation is shutting our resources down. I mean, when you and I were growing up in the 90s, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have smartphones. The internet was just a thing. We were playing outside and we came in when the street lights came on. And, listen, smartphones are amoral. They're not right or wrong. It's like a brick. I can build a house with a brick or I can destroy someone's life with a brick. So, it's how we use it. But I think you're onto something that I think is so important, which means we have to be aware of the neurophysiological ramifications of stimulation, being aware of the information we're receiving. Because here's the thing, We are all being formed by something in our core mindsets, our default narratives, how we see ourselves and others, how we see our opportunities, and I mean, just swinging this back to where we started, the self-help industry says, or gives us a bunch of tropes, and those tropes give us the dopamine hit of thinking we're making progress, but there's a reason they don't work, because we keep going back to them. So I'm saying, like, there's a better path, which is transformation, not self-help.
Yeah, and what you do and your habits and your actions are important, and they do affect our outcomes.
Yeah.
But unless we change who we are, fundamentally who we are, not to be somebody we're not, but to be a healed, whole version of ourselves, right? Then the problem is, wherever we go, there we are. Whatever we do, there we are. Like, we're our problem, and we're going with us. It's so interesting. I love the work that you're doing here.
Thank you.
I love the work. Guys, listen, if you haven't gotten a copy of this, you need to go and get this, okay? And here's why. What I found in 20 years helping people transform their lives is what you're dealing with here is sort of the boogeyman in the closet, in the fact that it's not easily identifiable, right? So, like, here we are. Maybe even a lot of you listening, like, you're high achievers. You've made more money than anybody in your family. You've accomplished more things than anybody in your family. You're further ahead. And yet you're stressed. You don't have peace. You're unhappy. You're insecure. You got a lot of shame. You're always working for the love and approval of other people. And if we were to ask you, like, Chris, like, why are you doing that? The answer is, I don't know. Like, we look and say, well, nothing that bad has happened to me. And some of you, really bad things have happened. But I would look at my life and I'd say, I was raised in a house with two loving parents. They're still married. We didn't have a lot of money, but we weren't like poor, right? I had a pretty good life growing up. And yet I still have a lot of these things that I've had to unearth over the years. And what makes it so hard is it's at a subconscious level. We look and we're like,
nailed it.
I shouldn't feel this way. Or you feel like maybe something's wrong with you. Like, all these good things are happening. Why do I feel empty? Why do I feel alone? Why do I feel like I'm not enough? Why do I feel like something's wrong with me? And it's sort of like death by 1,000 paper cuts. In and of itself, it's nothing big that we can point to, but it's us being bombarded 1 million times a day for 20 years.
You're nailing it.
With crap that ain't true.
That's exactly right, Ian.
And you're doing the work of helping people to identify, to bring conscious awareness to a subconscious level occurrence, number one, and giving them the tools to work through that, which, guys, listen to me. If you do not work through this now, you will work through it later.
100%. Payday comes.
You can't get around it. You can't get away from it. You've got to dig into it. Through is the way.
That's a word.
Through is the way.
Ian, that's a word. Yeah, through is the way. I'll say it this way. Transformation doesn't happen in a day. It happens daily.
Yeah, I mean, and that's so good. And one of the things I stole from Pastor Craig Rochelle, right, is it's the little things done daily that create the big results that everybody wants, right? And it's this little stuff. It's like getting a little bit better, getting a little bit stronger, being able to see a little bit clearer, being able to trust ourselves a little bit more because we know who we are and whose we are. And we're creating that identity instead of letting everyone, everywhere, all of the time build that identity in us and then wonder why we're unhappy. Well, the marketers want us to be unhappy without their product.
Correct.
The politicians want us to be unhappy without their candidate. The school system wants us to be unhappy without their degree. Like, this is the world we live in, right? And then we wonder, like, why are we here? Chris, what would you say to somebody, we were talking a little bit offline. You said there's two sorts of people this book is for. One is the people who are stuck, stalled, stagnant right now. The other is for people who feel like they're doing amazing and things are great right now. I'm like, gosh, I don't know if I need this. Like, I don't deal with that stuff. How do each of those two groups of people relate to this work that you put together? And why is it beneficial to them?
Yeah, sure. So again, let me just go to the first group of people. I just want to say, whatever you're walking through right now is valid, and I'm so sorry. We don't need to move on from it, but transformation happens when you move forward through it. So I want to just honor the space you're in right now, whatever the betrayal, the financial collapse, the relationship collapse, the business breakdown, whatever it is. I want to say I'm so sorry. Right now, there's an overwhelming level of perhaps anxiety and grief in your life. I want to come as a lifeline to you. not to give you pithy tropes and say, you are enough, because you want to know something, Ian? This is so antithetical to the self-help messaging. I am not enough.
Amen.
I am enough
Amen.
in my identity as the creation created by the hand of Almighty God. But when it comes to effecting meaningful, systemic change in my life, I do not have the wherewithal to do it within my own power. So let me be a lifeline to that person listening today and say, let me give you a roadmap to transform your mental, emotional, and spiritual health from the inside out. Because when we get under the hood, you're saying, Chris, how does this affect my bottom line? How does this affect my P&L? How does this affect my organization's internal health? Here's why. Because when you get healthy, your actions, your choices, your frame of mind, the way you lead, everything changes. But you will only lead from who you really are. If you are, let's say an entrepreneur is listening to us right now, Ian, saying, I think we're doing okay, but my team is exhausted. I'm stressed out. I'm working 80 hours a week. My spouse thinks I'm distant. My friend, you are not going to fix the conflict outside until you fix the conflict in here.
Yeah.
Okay. Person number 2, he's saying, Chris, Ian, hey, this sounds great, but my mental and emotional health in life is fine. Life is good. Do I really need this book? And I want to say this to you. Storms in life are inevitable. And while I don't mean to be fatalistic, we all are bound to experience a measure of loss and disappointment in life. The trouble is that there's no time to prepare for a storm once it hits. And rarely, Ian, can we accurately predict how we will respond to a storm until we're in one. And because few people understand this point, they experience far worse pain that might have been necessary because of the unmitigated stress and anxiety associated with their crisis. So let me use this book to shore up the foundation of your house, so to speak. When the rains come, when the wind blows, I want to see your house stand. It does not mean that it's not going to hurt. It does not mean that there won't be a level of loss. But you will get stronger if you don't give up. Giving into change, these muscles of perseverance and endurance grow under adversity and resistance. I'm going to tell you right now, my friend, transformation is hard, change is hard, but not changing is even harder, especially in the long run.
Yeah, it's so good. I love it. Chris, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me today. And it's always good catching up with you. When you sent me the book, I'm like, oh, I love this. I've got to get Chris on here. Guys, listen, do me a favor. Y'all know I don't pitch stuff to you on the podcast, right? Like, and Chris, I'm not affiliate. I don't have it. I actually do have an Amazon whatever link, but I'm not going to give it out. I want people to get this because I think it's good. And I think you should.
Thank you,
not because I get anything for it. Guys, Healing What You Can't Erase with Chris Cook. You got to grab this book. You got to dive into it. And when's the best time to plant a tree? 50 years ago, right? The second best time to plant a tree.
There it is, Ian. That's right.
And the worst time to plant a tree is tomorrow. And it's the same when preparing for crises. I love what you said, right? Like, they're going to come. You're either in a crisis, you're coming out of one, or you're heading into one. And so if that's true, and it is, then it would make sense that we prepare as much as we reasonably can so that when those adversities hit, we're strong and we're resolved and we're built up to be able to weather those storms a little bit better than we were. And the best time to do that is in a season of sunshine, right? So I love that. So no matter where you are right now, if you're stuck, if you're struggling, if you're fighting an internal battle that maybe you feel like nobody sees you, nobody knows what you're going through. Maybe you feel like because you're a leader, you don't have a place to go to share that, right? You don't have help and support. Grab the book, work through it, okay? I promise you it's a work worth doing because you are a life worth living and a purpose that means something to the rest of the people. One of the things I want to leave people with here is sometimes your challenges aren't for you. Sometimes they're for the people that are going to be connected to you. And it's not just about you getting better. It's not just about you being at peace. Many of you listening, resolving these issues is a key component to unlocking your destiny and to releasing the dreams that are attached to yours. So if no other reason, will you show up today as the best version of yourself and start working through some of these challenging things instead of avoiding them, instead of minimizing them, instead of pretending they don't matter or they're not there. maybe we can be real and we could say, hey, I struggle, you struggle. Let's get to the bottom of those things. Let's acknowledge it. Let's move forward. Chris, great job on the book.
Thank you.
I'm really, really enjoying it.
Thank you, my
Thank
friend.
you so much for being here. How do people connect with you? Where do they get the book, and how can they connect with you?
Sure. The book is available everywhere books are sold, and I do mean everywhere. It's available in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. So a person's like, I don't have time to read a book. Get the audiobook while you work out, while you're driving the kids to school, whatever, in the commute. So those 3 editions are available, again, everywhere books are sold. I'm on all social media platforms at Win Today Chris. That's Win Today Chris, and the website is wintoday.tv or healing.
I love it. Chris, thanks so much. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for your work and your passion in this subject. And I know it's going to make a lot of difference to a lot of people who are listening.
Thank you.
And until next time, we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.